All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. This is the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub hosting Water Quality Monitoring 101 and who uses the data. So we have a team here. Let me really quickly share the agenda on my screen. So we're all looking at the same thing. Actually, you know what? I'm going to wait just 1 second to do that. And we're going to talk about, so you don't get distracted while we're talking. We're just going to do a quick overview about who the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub is. And then we'll go over the agenda. But anyway, I'll introduce myself. I'm Christy Perrin. I am the Sustainable Waters and Communities Coordinator at the Water Resource Research Institute and North Carolina Sea Grant, and I'm located here at NC State. And just who is the Aquatic Data Hub? Just a real quick overview of that. We've been around for about 10 years. And we're a really casual group, but we're looking to grow and engage more of y'all in this effort. But basically, a group of folks who were interested in supporting citizen water monitoring held a summit about 10 years ago. I think it was in Chapel Hill. And people there were very interested in expanding support for citizen water monitoring and talked about how important it was, particularly with less funding coming down from governmental sources to actually do this. So that group of folks came together and got a Z. Smith Reynolds grant. I believe that's where it came from, George. Yeah, and George Santucci's nodding his head because the New River Conservancy was a lead on getting that grant funding. And they had the lead in a group putting together some resources, such as a guidebook, which you'll hear about a little bit later about how to monitor, and some webinars sharing that guidebook, and putting together a database, which you will also hear about towards the end of this webinar, just what resources are available and what we're still working on as a group. So we're pretty casual. We are meeting by Zoom once a month. We are all volunteers or a little bit of our job working on this. It doesn't have its own dedicated funding source or anything like that, but we get together once a month, and we can share. If we get your email address, we can share out that information if you want to join. It's part peer support, answering questions from each other, sharing ideas, and then working together on resources and products as a data hub. So I hope that's a good quick overview. I am going to now turn it over to Dr. Angela Allen from NC State College of Natural Resources. She's a newer joiner of the Aquatic Data Hub. And Angela, do you want me to share the agenda so you can?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay, let me do that.
Awesome.
And I'll let you talk.
All right. Well, morning. Christy said, this is the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub. This is a really great place to network with participants with common themes. And some things I've learned so far is like we're improving our waterways, we're educating our communities, and we're also engaging with our communities. We're a big group from various regions and backgrounds, so I really appreciate that. And we get to meet once a month on equal terms. So today's webinar, we have wonderful speakers. We're going to start off with Cam McNew from the North Carolina NCDEQ, followed with Adam Gregg, from the US EPA. And then if you look down, we have some time for questions and discussions. And then we're going to get to hear from Anne Marie Traylor from Environmental Quality Institute. She has her cute t-shirt on. I like it. We have Emily Sutton from Haw River, George Santucci from the town of Boone. And of course, again, some more time for questions and discussions. And like I said earlier, we're a group of people from various regions and backgrounds, and I hope you enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but we have been sharing that link in the chat if you want to go to that agenda yourself and look at it. So we'll go ahead and kick off with our speakers, and we're going to introduce Cam McNutt to do an introduction of water quality from a state perspective. So Cam, are you able to share where you're at?
We'll find out.
All right, we'll give you about 15 minutes, so go ahead. And I do see your screen, it's just not in presentation mode yet.
How about now? No.
You are
Looks
in
good.
presentation mode now, so
Good.
good job.
Okay, now the question will be, can I change the slides? I think I can. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cam McNutt. I'm with Division of Water Resources. I'm in the modeling and assessment branch. One of the reasons that I'm talking here is because I'm kind of one of the big end users of all the data that are collected in North Carolina. And I do this thing called the Water Quality Assessment, or the 303D list, every 2 years, which really drives a lot of water resource funding in the state. And it's kind of the basis for getting funding to do restoration work, as well as it impacts permits. So that's kind of where I'm starting off from. I'm not going to get into a lot of technical details. I'm more going to talk about why we do this and how important it is. So quick overview there. I'm not going to do this necessarily in order, but hopefully to touch on a lot of these things as we go along, and really to emphasize for folks that want to get interested is how easy it is to get involved in monitoring programs around the state. So a couple of definitions. These aren't from the dictionary. These are from me. And this is just to help people understand what it is that they're getting and how it's being used. So when I talk about data, I'm generally talking about numerical information that we can use to compare to other numbers. And I'll give you some examples of that. And then information is also data, but it is a lot more subjective, qualitative, observational, but still very useful. And in the past, we in the somewhat regulatory area have been very not accepting of informational type of things that we can use to tell us what's going on in any particular watershed. But we now have a mechanism to collect more of that. And then monitoring here is more general, and that is collecting data and information to look at current conditions, past conditions, and in the case of the group that I'm in, we can use that to look at future scenarios as well. So some examples, one that people that are in monitoring are familiar with is if you collect water quality data like dissolved oxygen, and you have 25 of your 40 samples are below 4 milligrams per liter. That's the kind of data that people generally associate with water quality assessment, 303D listing, that sort of thing. This type of data requires, because we're making regulatory decisions with it, it requires us to have a lot of rigor when we collect that and use those types of data. But we have other types of information and data that we're getting that can kind of be used both ways. Like we have an app where you can collect the number of trash bags. So there's a number, you have a number of trash bags, but how usable is it? Maybe if we had the weight of the trash bags, we might push that into data versus information. Still very useful though. We have another application for just scouting out where the trash is in creeks. We have an application where we can look at wet weather discharges from different pipe locations. That's actually what you're seeing in that little diagram with the dots on it there. Those are a bunch of little pipes that people found, and the ones that are red were ones that had water coming out of them. The ones that were blue did not, and this was after some rain, so it wasn't necessarily illegal discharges. And then we have another application where you can look at aquatic habitat, which if you do it one way, might be considered data. If you do it another way, it might be considered information. Either way, useful. Either way, we like people to collect this information for us. And for those familiar with benthic macroinvertebrates, those are aquatic insects that live in creeks. Those can be collected in an informational and a data-driven way where we can make regulatory decisions with them, but we can also make other decisions with those as well that aren't necessarily regulatory. So just a few examples to give you kind of the wide range of information that we might be wanting to collect and look at, not just in DWR, but lots of other agencies and groups that are trying to make decisions and want to have the best information and data they can to make those. So this is a map of North Carolina, as you can see, and those little dots, stars, squares, diamonds, those are all different types of monitoring programs that we have in the state. Most of those are agency within division or Department of Environmental Quality. Most of that would be DWR or marine fisheries in the coastal area. But there are also a mix of discharger coalition data in there. The bottom line I'm trying to get to here is that number of those physical chemical sites, that's the ones where you think of where people putting bottles in the water and using meters. That number is 2,500. Well, about 20 years ago, 600 of those were DWR sites that were in freshwaters inland. That number is down to about 300 now. So again, pointing out the need that it's getting more expensive is one part of it, but also we have not had budgeting that allows us to continue to expand monitoring. And in fact, we have decreased our monitoring over the years. Even with all the monitoring that we have over the course of these dots probably are looking over the last 30 years, only about 25 to 30% of North Carolina waters are considered to be monitored. And one of the big gaps we have in those are the smaller streams, say stuff that's less than knee deep. We do not have a lot of monitoring in there. A lot of our initial monitoring was set up in a permitting paradigm. So a lot of it was set up as an upstream and downstream of wastewater treatment plants. And we haven't really changed that all that much over the years. So to get a little more specific and talk about data tiers, this is how we kind of classify data depending on the rigor with which it's collected, its quality assurance and quality control program, the type of laboratories that may be used, and then this is also how we categorize data in terms of how we would use it when you send it to me. So whether or not that's going to be used for regulatory decision making or for informational decision making. So we have 3 tiers. Tier 1 data are generally do not require a quality assurance, quality control program. And that's kind of some of those things I was talking about where you're taking pictures of trash bags or doing pretty simple aquatic habitat assessments, stream walks and photos. We increasingly want this type of information, and we are really trying to make sure that there's very little friction between people being able to get that and being able to get it to us. So tier 1 information, we'll probably use that information to drive further data collection, but in and of itself, we wouldn't be using that for any kind of a regulatory decision making, including putting something onto a 303D list. Tier 2 data and Tier 3 data are very much the same in that we do require some sort of quality assurance program to be in place. Quality assurance, quality control, or what's called a QAPP, which you'll probably hear more about later. The difference between those two is that the Tier 2 data, we would expect the collecting entity to follow their QAPP, but we would not be the ones approving that, versus the Tier 3 data, for any data that are going to be used in some kind of regulatory manner, we are going to be approving that quality assurance program plan, and then we're going to be following up with the data submitters to make sure that they followed it. So kind of a concurrence. So data quality, the same. Data endpoint usage, slightly different. We can use those Tier 2 data directly in our integrated reporting and our water quality assessment. We just can't use it to decide whether something is going to require regulatory action or not. But we can use it where we have already put, say, a restoration plan in place, and we're trying to determine how effective that restoration plan has been. So that is kind of the main uses of that Tier 2 data. And the Tier 3 data main uses is to make those decisions on whether or not a water body needs to have some sort of regulation or restoration plan put in place. So those are the big differences between those 3. And that website down there at the bottom, you can also search NC303D on any kind of search engine, and it'll get you there pretty quickly. And when you click on the contact info, it's going to send it straight to me anyway, so you can just bypass that and send me an email. So kind of the importance of data and information management, which is kind of the gist of the Aquatic Data Hub, is to kind of that big bold bullet there is the one that I really like to emphasize, and that's being able to put together, instead of a project where someone goes out and gets a bunch of volunteers and they collect data 1 month and then it's kind of done, we want to turn those into programs. So kind of an ongoing effort to be able to collect data and information at whatever tier or level you want to do it at. But we're hoping using tools like the Aquatic Data Hub and Water Quality Exchange or any others will help people not only be able to do their quality assurance, quality control program, be able to best visualize their data, get some assurance about where their data are being located. And this other one that I have in here, toxic spreadsheet syndrome, that's where you have 50 different people that all insist they have the same data and they don't. And then they send it to me, and then that, even though they may have collected their data at a tier 3 level, use a certified lab, if they didn't manage it at that level, then I still can't use it. And those two graphics are an example that I had received in the past, where I have dissolved oxygen data collected on the same date at the same place, but with different results, because two different people, one person adjusted based on sheets, the other one didn't. So it's really important for repeatability and reliability to have some sort of data management in place, so that there's only one place where you get to go get something, and that place is the same one that I will get, so that when we produce information or it comes out of the Water Quality Exchange, wherever it is, if it's from one station, one parameter at the same time, it should be the same. Because if it's not, then you kind of lost all your reliability. So that's kind of the importance of the data management side of it. Even if you check all the boxes everywhere else, you still need to manage the data. And that is one of the things that we do approve in our QAPP process. And just to kind of sum up, why and how to get involved, it's interesting. If you have any interest in water, it's fun to get out and wade around in water. Big thing, and I think others are going to drive this home, locally collected data is very good for making local decision making. People are much more likely to want to engage with local folks that have collected the data and want to make a decision versus me in Raleigh, or in this case in Virginia, making those decisions. And it also helps target limited resources. We have some information, but we don't have all information. So anywhere that can elucidate, whether tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, give us more information on what needs to be done is always valuable. And for purposes of all of our partners out there, having a good data collection program is really good for leveraging new and ongoing funding to keep your program going. And for how to get involved, there's my information down at the bottom. Send me an email, and then I will probably point you back to other folks, depending on what it is that you want to do as far as data and information collection. So that's all I have.
Wow, that was very concise, Cam. Good job. We have like a couple minutes before we had scheduled our next speaker. So if there is a question or two for Cam, you are welcome to raise it at this point, or any point in the chat.
And if not, I will have no problem using his time.
I would count on Adam to be able to do that.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised right now. So thank you, Cam. Why don't we, you can, I see, okay, you can stop sharing. And now we will move on to Adam Griggs with the US EPA. And Adam is a longtime Aquatic Data Hub supporter before he was with EPA. So we are happy to have him back sharing information with us as a group and supporting us. So thank you, Adam. I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. So you guys seeing the presentation slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I am Adam Griggs. I'm an ecologist, EPA headquarters and Office of Water in a little group called the Water Data Integration Branch, which if you contribute water data in any part of the process, we're the little group that it goes to. And so here to tell you guys about, some update on some of the tools that we have and how they support participatory science and how what we have can link up with Aquatic Data Hub and the monitoring that you're doing. So brief overview, the Clean Water Act is actually implemented by the states, territories, and tribes. And they largely do things in the way that makes sense, for their regions, for their resources. Not everyone is out there monitoring in the same way and have the same resources and the same things to manage. And then EPA, we're organized into about 10 different regions that work directly with those states, tribes, and territories. And then folks like myself, parked at headquarters, we largely administer the programs, build tools and resources to help the programs along. So as you can imagine, right off the bat, that can get challenging because we've got, we've got more than 100 different ways of doing things out there, right? So folks, different data sets that folks are contributing. And then on top of that, there's not just one program under the Clean Water Act. There are numerous complicated, involved programs under the Clean Water Act, and each of them with their own objectives, their own jargon, their own data that they're producing, their own data needs. And these are often siloed in different programs within an agency or even in different agencies. And as Cam can probably attest, it's already a challenge for the state agencies to organize and manage all the data across these programs, make sure that they're exchanging information efficiently to meet their objectives and goals. So you can imagine with all of these different programs, each of these state entities, they're all sharing that information up to EPA. And our job is to try to consolidate and integrate this, turn it back into public information. And so this is a major challenge. And to accomplish that, we have created a suite of online public-facing data systems that intake all this information, try to put it on a harmonized bar, and then explain it as best we can. So I brought up the life cycle of data diagram down there at the bottom because kind of all data, no matter what it is, has to follow those same kind of general paths, and that helps kind of explain what these different systems are doing as well. So to assist with study design and data collection and monitoring, we do have our national program, the National Aquatic Resource Surveys. That's a national statistically derived program so that we can try to answer the question generally of what is the state of the nation's waters. But it's only a little bit of monitoring that's out there, but it's also developing a lot of methods that the states can deploy as well. In addition to that, EPA produces all sorts of methods you can use in the field, chemical methods, quality assurance project plan support. But obviously, we're not out there doing the monitoring. That's what you guys are all doing. But past that point, we can build these systems that help folks manage the data, share the information, analyze that, and eventually communicate it. And so these are some of the systems I'm going to be talking about quickly today. And we're really going to focus in on 3 of them, the Water Quality Exchange, the Water Quality Portal, and How's My Waterway, because these are the ones where water quality monitoring data flows and comes out of, and the ones that you guys can interact with most directly. So real quick, what does it look like in North Carolina right now? What do we have in the Water Quality Portal for monitoring data? And this map looks a lot like the one Cam just showed, right? You can see the outline of the state, lots of dots, and definitely a lot of data out there, right? In this map, blue points are federal data sources, so either EPA, maybe national parks. USGS is quite a lot of it in North Carolina. The red points, those are the state agencies, old DWR programs or DEQ programs or other. And you can see a lot of red dots out there. The orange dots are NGOs, and they are somewhat conspicuously missing. I didn't make this map until last week, and I was expecting that at some point in the history, because we have data going back to the 1800s, if there was going to be more NGO data that had been contributed to WQX and the Water Quality Portal. But that's why we're here, and that's why we're working with the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub. We're trying to organize the monitoring that we know everyone's out there collecting and make sure that data can get contributed and can find more and additional uses and inform decision makers. Overall, we do have quite a bit. There's over 11 million sample results from almost 20,000 sites. But again, I think there's probably at least double that out there that has not been contributed. If you look at states that kind of have a longer history with supporting volunteer monitoring programs, I pulled up just Massachusetts, I wanted to see what they look like. And they've actually got a number of programs ongoing right now to connect even more data. But you can see there's more orange dots on the map. And this is really important because even if it looks like there's a lot of information, when you zoom in, you're going to find, like Cam said, there's a lot of missing information, spatially, headwater streams. We just can't sample everywhere. And temporally, over time, you might also be surprised. Again, this is all data we've ever collected. Somebody may not have been to your stream in the last 10 years. The states don't have the budgets to be able to monitor everywhere for all the information they need. So they often deploy strategies like randomized sampling or rotating basins to make sure they get around to everything eventually and collect the information they need. But again, there's a lot of gaps. Now, the NGOs that are embedded in the community, there's a water body that they care about. They have a dedicated volunteer force, and you're putting boots on the ground season after season, year after year. That is incredibly important data that's filling in the gaps in place and time. And so we definitely want to see this data get more organized and get contributed. So how can Aquatic Data Hub, DEQ, EPA all work to help organize this? By doing a lot of the things that North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub has already been doing, producing guidance on some standards for monitoring, identifying those uses, the data tiering that we help develop, to make it obvious and understandable how your data could be used by decision makers, producing SOPs like the Aquatic Data Hub manual for monitoring. So that stuff's out there. You can invest in building data management tools because data management is not easy. To help these groups better manage and share their data, like the North Carolina Aquatic Hub database, the DEQ templates that are put out to share data with the agency, and the WQX support that we can provide. What we're doing today, educating and training on data management and how and why to share that data. So that's a big one that kind of never stops. And lastly, making sure we're providing a suite of options to get data shared and organized, because there's a lot of different programs out there, some of them more resourced than others, some of them more equipped than others with capabilities. So making sure that we have a variety of ways to get that data shared and make it as easy as possible. So jumping back into some of these connected water quality data systems, I want you guys to understand how they work. These things get updated constantly. And so if you think you knew how they worked 5 years ago, we've made a lot of changes in that time, I can assure you. And so there's probably going to be some, I wish I had more time and we could probably dig in on an hour on each of these systems. But I'll give you a quick overview of how they work together and how they can work for your programs and work for North Carolina. At the bottom is the Water Quality Exchange. This has been around in some format since the 60s. It's really just a data standard. It's a common way for us all to share the water quality information that we collect, so that when we all contribute our data sets, those data sets end up looking in the same format, and we're all calling the same things, and we can make apples to apples comparisons, get big data, and answer big questions. And make that data available for your community and decision makers now and into the future. So there's real power in sharing your information through this system and making it available for folks to use it. Now, WQX itself is not where the data comes out. It's just where the data goes in. Where the data comes out is the Water Quality Portal, and that is co-managed between ourselves at EPA and the USGS. And so it's an interagency federal portal, so it combines everyone's data that's submitting to WQX with all the data that's coming out of USGS as well. And there's a user interface there, folks can download data, but the Water Quality Portal also serves data through what we call web services. And that means that a website can call the Water Quality Portal very easily just by having a URL with all the instructions that they want put in their data set. And then that data set lives at the end of that URL. So anytime they call that, they can get data back. And that's exactly what we do in How's My Waterway. which is our information viewer. So there's no data that actually lives in How's My Waterway. It's just a website application, and it's calling sources of public information live and then integrating and showing you that information for your local community. And so if you haven't ever explored How's My Waterway, I definitely encourage you to spend some time digging around and see what's available. We'll take a very brief look at it today. But who is using WQX? We've got about 1,600 different organizations that have contributed data up to the federal portals. And that includes federal and state agencies and programs, tribes, pueblos, First Nations, local government, research, academia, private industry, NGOs, and volunteer monitors. I just pulled these updated numbers this morning. So currently we're up to about 431 million and some change overall records from over 1.1 million sites. And the most of that is coming from the EPA side, from the WQX side. So you'll see about 115 million samples coming out of USGS and about 315 million samples coming from WQX and all the different folks that have contributed data there. So quite a lot of information. But again, I estimate it's probably still only about 10% of the monitoring data that's out there. So that's kind of my mission, is to get as much data into these systems as possible. How can submitting to WQX and sharing your data to these systems help your program? There's a number of ways, but data security is a big one. You've invested a lot in this monitoring data. Sharing it to WQX ensures that it's always there and there's a copy. And additionally, if there's turnover in your organization and folks don't know how to pick up the pieces, we store the paths also that you have built to flow your data. So when there's turnover, we can train your new staff and show them exactly how to pick up the pieces there. Data sharing is what we're kind of talking about today. The data collected can serve many purposes, not just for your programs, but for decision makers and researchers and managers and the general public now and into the future. So it's not just now, we share it now and it's going to be there 20 years from now, and the next generation is asking questions about where we've been. Data management itself, it's a real pain. It's complicated. It takes technical resources, sometimes a lot of money. But some programs are now solely relying on the WQX and water quality portal kind of infrastructure to be a primary integration point of all of their different programs. So if they have all these different data sets that are producing data looks a little differently, it can be real bare to try to put them together. So sometimes they're just flowing it right up to WQX and then letting the water quality portal be their big data set that comes back down to them. And data use. Getting data ready for analysis and building web applications, story maps, communicating your results to the public is also another challenging thing that's made a lot easier by having your data here, because the water quality portal can serve that data out to your favorite application, whether it's just an Excel spreadsheet or some R application, or it's an ARC story map. You can pipe your data directly from Water Quality Portal into these applications and start to build communication tools that explain what you've discovered there. WQX is very robust, just like the Aquatic Data Hub, the database that we've been building. It can hold a lot of different types of information collected from different facets of watershed science. We're not always just sampling water. Sometimes we're sampling fish, biological samples, tissue samples, maybe sediment samples. We're taking measures and counts. We might be calculating metrics or indices. We might be collecting data across depth profiles or longitudinal surveys. And WQX can handle all of that information. I almost consider it a personal challenge. Anytime a scientist comes up with a new way to measure something about water data, I'm like, oh, I bet we can fit that in there. So it's pretty robust, and it doesn't change that often because it's been around since the 60s. So we've kind of largely worked out the science of how to store this information, and it's just a matter of getting it there. There are a number of different submission options. So for those DIYers on the right-hand side, there are Excel templates where you can just manually put your data into those templates to get it there. But what most folks don't pick up, one is we have a custom import ability. So within the WQX web application, you can map your data sets to build custom imports. So leave your data the way it looks and teach WQX how to read in that information and add in any missing metadata. And that's largely the path we've built with Aquatic Data Hub. But when you use the Aquatic Data Hub database, it's going to be able to export out information in a manner that is compatible with WQX, and we can easily facilitate that upload. For more sophisticated programs or developers, we also have APIs on the application or the Exchange network to be able to self-publish a WQX formatted file if you can do that directly. So we're trying to have different options that support folks with different levels of data management capabilities, so that no matter what your capability is, you should be able to get your data up there. We also have a help desk, and we have free contractor assistance as well to help folks build their data flows. So I'll have some contact information at the end in case you ever want assistance in pursuing this. This is what the application looks like. So WQX is the standard, WQX Web is the application. That's often a little bit of a point of confusion as well. They don't realize that they're kind of talking about two different things. And so the application just helps you get your data set into the WQX format. And there's lots and lots of tools within this application for folks to map, import, manipulate, and change the way their data looks. Ultimately, when you submit data to WQX, you're submitting 3 unique tables of information. So a description of all your different monitoring projects, a description of your different monitoring locations. And then when you go to upload all your results data, you're including the ID for the location and any project IDs that data should be associated with. And the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub database also organizes this data into these same tables for better. It's just a better way of storing the information, and it also makes it compatible with the WQX system. Quick shot at our template resource page. We have different templates for different types of data. So, if you have, fish data or macroinvertebrate data or habitat data, we have templates that have been pre-configured to show you how to best enter that information. This is what the import configurations look like. So if you're going to do that custom mapping in WQX, these are the windows that come up and all the capabilities that allow you to rearrange and reformat your data set and get it into the WQX standard without you actually having to reformat your data set. So that's the power. If you've got 25 years of data, and it's a major exercise when you look at those templates to say, I can't put it into that WQX format. This is going to take way too much time. You don't have to necessarily. You can leave your data looking the way it is and build a map of that data set. Here's a quick example of what that looks like. We were recently contacted by Alabama Water Watch, almost 30 years of monitoring history across the state with volunteers. And this is what their data look like. This is probably a format that might be very recognizable to many of you, where each row is a different day's sampling event, and each column holds a different measured parameter from that day's sampling event. We didn't have to change this data at all. We were able to map it exactly like this and quickly import 25 years worth of their data to get it up onto the water quality portal on How's My Waterway. So that's WQX. That's your data entry point into getting into these public shared data systems. The water quality portal is where all that data then comes back out. And again, this serves data from USGS, National Park Service, EPA, USDA, and everybody that's ever wanted to share their data to WQX, it's there. So again, over 430 million records, 1,600 different organizations, data of all types. It includes a website with a graphical user interface, so a form that you can select your options, query the data that you're looking for, and then get that data download at the bottom. The other thing it does, though, is at the bottom, it also gives you the nice little URL that has all the instructions for what you just input into that form above. And that's the magical little URL that you can copy there, and you can paste that into a number of applications. Like an R or an Excel spreadsheet or an ArcGIS map, Power BI, whatever your favorite application is for working with data, you can probably make a live connection to the portal. What does that mean? Anytime that someone submits data in your watershed, all of your charts and your projects and your maps are going to update automatically because they have a live connection to the portal and new data has been contributed that matches your query. So that's a really powerful service and incentive to share this information if you're in the business of building tools that then communicate all of that data back to your constituents. And then How's My Waterway is kind of our example of what you can build on top of systems that are built this way. So when you have a database that's sending out information in a machine readable web service format, you can call it and interpret it live. And so that's what How's My Waterway does. We don't have time to really take a look at it today, but I encourage you guys to go over there, take a look. It includes now all the water quality portal monitoring stations. So each of those purple dots is a water quality portal monitoring station. And you can click on any one of those and get time series plots for all the parameters that have been sampled there. There's a nice time scale bar so you can find the information the time you're looking for, filter and explore the data, and download that data directly from How's My Waterway. It'll call the portal and package up that data for you. So pretty cool stuff. That's it for now. Just wanted to get you, let you guys know about these tools and how to connect to them and how the Aquatic Data Hub is going to connect to them as well.
Great, thank you, Adam. I think there was a question in the chat. I'm gonna go to it. Let's see. Ryan says downloading WQX directly to R is typically very slow, especially when downloading more than a year's worth of data. Is there any way to increase the speed of download?
Huh, that's interesting. Might have to see exactly how you are doing that or how much data you are trying to get. Obviously, if you're trying to pull down the entire data set database in the last year's worth of data, that probably would be pretty slow. There are some packages within R also for doing large data retrievals. So it'll actually break up your data set and then recombine it for you. So it's less likely to time out. But if that is an issue you're dealing with, feel free to reach out to me directly and we can troubleshoot your application.
Do any other questions come to mind? Maybe questions of clarification for Adam and or Cam about EPA use or processing of data or DEQ or how they can support your efforts. Okay, well, just to make sure you are all on your toes here, I'm gonna give you a little poll.
Well, we got just one in the chat just
Oh,
now.
did we? Okay, hold on, let me, whoops, I think I just, all right,
Yeah.
here we go.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, does the exchange system perform any QA when you upload?
So yes, that's actually a pretty new feature we added last, I think maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years maybe. So we don't validate necessarily, won't reject your data if it doesn't pass our QA, but after you upload, you get a report. And in that report, we're going to do things like compare all your measures against observed ranges that we see come in, or we're going to flag it for any maybe invalid unit combinations, or maybe a chemical method that doesn't make sense for that parameter. And we've also do some flagging on your location as well. So sometimes folks will forget a negative in a lat long and their point ends up in Mongolia. And we'll say, are you sure? Because it doesn't look like it's in North Carolina. And so you'll get a report that way. And then if you see some errors, you can actually really quick correct that report and just resubmit the report. And it'll correct your data set. Yeah, so when we so she had a substantive question of the reports published as metadata with all data, so we can see issues or data we're downloading that's not ours, not out of the water quality portal. So you actually have to come to WQX to do that. And anyone now within the WQX system, you're limited to the data, you're the data owner. So as far as seeing data that's not ours, talk to me about that. If there's permission issues, if it's not a concern, we can probably get a QA report for you. But largely when you're within the system, you can only do that for your own data. And eventually we do want to make these QA reports available at the water quality portal. It's honestly just a time and resource issue at the moment.
Okay, any other questions? Oh yeah, I'm gonna launch the Oh, thank you, Adam. I'm gonna launch this poll here. Can people see a poll? And I know people who are watching this later as a recorded webinar will not see it, but the poll does ask, what is your stream monitoring goal? And there's a few potential answers there. So we'll just give you a minute to, if you're participating, to put in your program, your goals. Got about 60% of people answering. Let's give another few seconds here. Okay, all right, it's slowed down. So last call, if you want to submit your answer. Okay. And can you see the results here? Yeah, so it's good to know what folks are here for. Interested in knowing more. A couple are interested in starting a local stream monitoring program. Please reach out to any of us afterwards if you are one of those two folks, because we are happy to provide help and support as much as we can. And same for enhancing an existing program. There's several folks who are doing that, and then supporting local stream monitoring programs. So great, thanks for sharing. We're glad you could join and hope that we're helping you with those goals. Okay, now we are going to look at some case uses here, and Adam popped in that I will add our TADA package. Sounds great. Okay, now I would like to turn to one of our members, Anne-Marie Trailer with the Environmental Quality Institute and the great shirt, and let you take it away and share your water quality program out there in the mountains. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thank you so much, Christy. Let's see here. Share this. All right, can you all see my volunteer stream monitoring in the North Carolina mountains?
I can, and we see your main presentation slide. We also see little thumbs at the bottom, which are
okay.
fine.
Hang on.
Because we can still.
Is that any different?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, so I'm Anne-Marie Trailer. I'm the director of the Environmental Quality Institute, and we do stream monitoring in the mountains over here in Western North Carolina. And so I just wanted to talk about kind of what we do and our model of doing things and why we're even here. So we are a nonprofit environmental lab in Black Mountain, North Carolina. And we are kind of the hub of two different water monitoring programs. One is a chemical stream monitoring program and lakes called the Volunteer Water Information Network. We call it VWIN. It's been going on since 1990, so we have quite a lot of data built up over all these years and decades. So the samples are collected monthly by trained volunteers, and that training is usually done one-on-one with either us, EQI staff, or one of our partner organizations in other areas of the mountains. And it's just kind of one-on-one. We go to the site, show them how to collect a sample, and then those samples are kept in cold storage until we get them back to our laboratory here in Black Mountain, where we analyze them with staff and college interns with state certified methods. So this is a list of the tests we run monthly. So every month, about 200 sites come in, samples come in, and we test them for turbidity, total suspended solids, orthophosphate, ammonia, nitrates, pH, alkalinity, and conductivity. For lakes, we usually do total phosphorus during the warm months. And then we also test for fecal coliform kind of on an as-needed basis, just because that has kind of a stricter schedule for like a shorter time frame between sample collection and delivery to the lab. And so we have, you know, just some general statistics. We have 34 years of data at this point, going on 35, about 200 sites per month and 7 river basins, even though a few, like one of the river basins only has 3 sites right now. This is a map of our kind of current sites, with Asheville being kind of here in the middle. I know the sites are kind of overlapping a lot of the reference points in the map, but yeah, 15 counties. So that's kind of a lot for, you know, there's just 2 of us here as staff members at the lab. So the sites are mostly chosen by our partner organizations. And then the map is color coded by, you know, kind of excellent to poor site ratings. And by being able to partner with a lot of different organizations and have this kind of region-wide program, we're really able to have all different kinds of sites, like residential and urban and rural and forested and main stem rivers, but then also a lot of those headwater tributaries that Cam was talking about earlier. And then, you know, of course, some of the impaired streams as well. And then by having this, you know, kind of region-wide program, we're really able to kind of compare the water quality across the region, since it's all done the same way. Our second program is the Stream Monitoring Information Exchange, which we call SMIE. And so this is sampling benthic macroinvertebrates in the field, and we have been doing this since 2005. We have about 50 sites that we sample each spring and fall with trained volunteers. And the group leaders, volunteer group leaders, are usually the ones who go out with the volunteers and perform the identifications in the field. Some of the specimens are brought back for quality assurance. We contract with Dave Penrose to re-identify those quality assurance samples to get a comparison between the volunteer and biologist results. And we have 46 different taxa that are chosen specifically what is here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. For our training, this is way more involved since it's volunteers going out in the field to sample. So we have kind of an all-day workshop with morning in the lab with microscopes and PowerPoints, and then an afternoon in the field with doing the protocol, and then practicing identification on the live critters. We have group leader trainings so that they have extra training and extra testing to be able to lead groups. We have training videos available online. And then just our protocol is mostly the Rocky Bottoms protocol using a kick net, leaf pack, and visual survey as well. So this is a list of our partners as of last year. This is kind of a dynamic list that kind of changes year to year as people kind of drop in and out as the years go on. Some of them provide funding for the programs. Some of them are more interested in the bugs than the chemical monitoring. You know, we kind of have already talked about the data uses, so I won't go back over that. But I will point out a few, like James Environmental Association has been having kind of watershed level symposiums, and the French Broad River Partnership has been a really big regional collaboration over here in Western North Carolina, and the Aquatic Data Hub. Like, it's just a way to really get more people together at the same place to really problem solve beyond what we can do on our own. So I really love that aspect of what we do. So here in the mountains, you know, kind of what we deal with, you know, I kind of mentioned those things that we test for every month. We see problems with conductivity, alkalinity, pH, or not problems, we see fluctuations, differences. Naturally, we have really low levels here in Western North Carolina of conductivity and alkalinity. So these can be ways to see unnatural things happening in the landscape. So, you know, we deal with winters sometimes, a little less so these days, but we'll have problems with people putting out too much de-icer. We have point source pollution, whether it's permitted or unpermitted dischargers. So we also have, you know, stormwater issues. So we see things here where it's like we have, and this is not meant for you to be able to see the sites or anything, but in general, we have these low levels of conductivity here in the mountains, around 30 microsiemens per centimeter. And then we, you know, get to an urban area like Asheville, and it jumps up to like 300, 400. And so this is kind of the thing we can see with our monitoring here. And so sediment, of course, is a huge one. Over over history and in recent times, clearing the steep slopes and building in the floodplains and clearing the floodplains is a big issue around here. And the slopes we have, we get a lot of velocity going through these high gradient streams. And so it can really dig in and cause a lot of erosion in the streams and over the land. And so we can kind of look at our data and tease apart things like here's, this is turbidity over a 3-year period of sampling. And so we have less of a problem of sediment in urban areas except for, these kind of like flashy rainfall events. Whereas over in kind of the more rural agricultural areas with a lot of land cleared, we tend to have more consistent long-term sediment problems. Nutrients and bacteria, so phosphorus and nitrogen and things like that. We don't have the CAFOs here in the mountains that y'all do out east, but we do have just livestock spread across the landscape in a lot of places. And we have definitely septic failures and sewage leaks that we are like trying to track down over time. And so, this is an example of, the Ivy River watershed where we sample in the Big Ivy tributary and the Little Ivy tributary and can see really where phosphorus is coming from more than one more than the other, let's say. And this is an example of Flat Creek and Black Mountain. We're having a problem with high bacteria levels. And so we're trying to use a lab to track down where the sources of this high fecal coliform in just a little town is coming from. Habitat disturbance is another thing that we deal with, whether the streams are too loved or unloved. We have a lot of recreation here. You always see the stacks of rocks. We also have people that just, somebody made like a really cool ball run. There's a little ball here. They just drop it down, it goes down, like people move the rocks, people take the rocks, put them in their trunks, take them home for landscaping, things like that. And we have just general trash and debris that builds up. And so these are the types of things that our volunteers can make note of on their sampling forms, and it helps inform our interpretation of the results that we see in the lab. How we deal with the data, this is the simple way. We just have Google Sheets of for different projects or partners, and we put all those years of data in there with a tab of information that has methods and things like that. But this is like a locked spreadsheet that only we at EQI can modify. And then for more public access, we've developed a data portal that lives on our website, and people are able to see maps over different years of the two different programs, and then actually search and download the raw data or the site ratings that we've calculated. And I just like to point out, so this was updated last year, not even this year, and there's 58,803 entries, and this is just for the VWIN data, and that represents more than 58,000 times someone went to a stream and took a sample over the 34 years. So that's just, we couldn't do that with the staff that we have. And so volunteers are just super critical to what we do. And the reason we're here for the Aquatic Data Hub, like I mentioned, EQI, we've got 2 staff members. We have a lot of volunteers. We have a couple contractors and some interns. And trying to manage the data, we really focus our time on our local partners and who kind of just local level, like Cam was talking about, like local monitoring, helping local efforts. And so really, I see the benefit of the Aquatic Data Hub being meeting and commiserating with local or with state, professionals across the state and hearing what other people are working on and going through. And the database I am so excited about because I really am interested in getting this data to DEQ easier and getting it to the EPA easier, and that the database is meant to have that functionality. So that'll be a huge lift for our little organization, and sharing the data to a larger audience. And so that's really what I'm excited about the Aquatic Data Hub for. And I really appreciate you know, that Cam comes to all these meetings and we have a direct link to DEQ there, and that Adam comes, we have the direct link to EPA. And Christy, I'm just going to use my moment to say thank you for being our kind of de facto unelected like chair. I just appreciate all of you guys who come to these meetings and contribute. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Anne Marie. So let's go to our next presenter, Emily from Haw River Assembly. We're really happy to have her share a Piedmont. We thank Anne Marie for presenting a mountain view. We weren't able to get our coastal view for this webinar, so maybe at the next one we'll get a coastal person in. But Emily's been with Haw River Assembly for a while, and she has a great program over there with her team. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Christy. And I think that this is, well, first of all, can y'all hear me okay? I'm on a new computer. Okay, great. I love the way that you've stacked the presenters, because I feel like Kim and Adam and Anne Marie really set up the tone for this. And so I'm going to talk more about our program and the volunteer management and outreach, and not so much the heavy data stuff. So to give a quick introduction, because I recognize some of the names on this webinar, but there's a lot of you, so thanks for joining. I'm Emily Sutton. I'm the Haw River Keeper with Haw River Assembly. We're the water keeper organization in the entire Haw River watershed. So I have a map in this presentation, but for those of you who don't know, it's in the Piedmont. It's about 8 counties, includes Jordan Lake and all of the streams that go into it. So we're a pretty big watershed, and we work in the entire basin. So this Riverwatch program that we have, we really rely on a lot of our volunteers to collect information for our stream health throughout the watershed. We're a small staff. We're a nonprofit. It's the biggest staff that we've ever had in my time at Haw River Assembly, which has been 8 years. But there's 5 of us. So we can't reasonably be all over the watershed to document all the issues. So we really rely on community members that care deeply about this place that we love. So we are training volunteers to collect what we call snapshots or surveys every season, in their one section of stream or the Haw River itself. So the Riverwatch program, we train volunteers to conduct pH monitoring. They do turbidity monitoring with a turbidity tube and a Secchi disc at the bottom. And then they're looking at biological parameters, which is the biggest part of this, the macroinvertebrate survey, but also physical parameters. Does the stream have access to the floodplain? Are the banks eroding? Are the banks eroding where the stream bank is getting deeper, or is it getting more like wide floodplain? So all of that information is really important. And we're also looking at, where is this stream in its subwatershed? Is there development upstream? Is there a wastewater treatment plant outfall upstream? So all of these big picture parameters really tell us the story about what the water quality is, what's impacting the water quality, and how we as a riverkeeper organization can be a better advocate for that stream. Our volunteers, right now we have about 13 active teams throughout the watershed, but that has varied over the years. And at any given point, we've got people throughout the watershed who are conducting these. But we have a lot of people who are interested and then join our active teams. So the way that we generally do our outreach to get new teams or support our existing teams is just outreach about our program. Generally, we have some of our existing volunteers will do a blog post or why they like doing this work. But we also use this program as a recommendation for communities who are concerned about their stream. We get so many calls and emails from communities who are concerned about a development upstream. They live next to a beautiful forest, and now that forest is going to be 40 condos. So we can use this program to say, before this development goes in, let's get a baseline study of how our creek is doing. And so that community will then become the Riverwatch team for their small creek, so they can track the health of that creek before the development ever happens, as the development is happening, and then after the development has finished. And for this presentation, I'm really talking mostly about our Riverwatch program, but at the end, we have a couple other volunteer programs that I may allude to as well. We also have a map of where our existing teams are and where we know that we have water quality issues. So we can use these maps to do targeted outreach to say, we don't have enough teams in this part of Greensboro or this part of Alamance County. Can we work with a school program or the local Sierra Club or specific members or volunteers that are already a part of our organization to get some information about that part of our watershed? And then we also just do general workshops and trainings. It's really fun and fascinating to get a room full of people with small handheld microscopes looking at stoneflies. So that is a really fun way to get people engaged in this and to kind of dispel the intimidation of what these projects can look like. So our training, we hold 4 quarterly trainings. So if we have a training in, let's say we have a training on September 1st, if we get a team that reaches out to us on September 5th, they're going to wait until our winter training, which is fine. We keep in touch with them. We make sure that they know the date. But for us as staff, we schedule 4 quarterly trainings. And so then at each of those trainings, we may have 3 to 5 potential teams that want to join. We do have to charge for this program, which is something that we've gone back and forth on about that cost over the years. But the equipment that we give the volunteers is not cheap. We use the net that you see here in the photo. That's honestly one of the most expensive parts of this whole program. We use small pH kits that run about 60 to 70 bucks. And then a lot of it is the macroinvertebrate work. So we've got little ice cube trays and magnifying glasses and sheets and a Riverwatch manual. And so we give each team that set of equipment. And sometimes they return it to us if they're not doing the program anymore, but that's kind of hard to track down. So we have to charge to cover a partial cost of our equipment. So it's about $120 per team. And volunteers do provide their own waders and boots. But we do help them select a location. Anne-Marie was talking about a lot of the mountain streams, which are very beautiful and very different from the Piedmont. So we really have to look at the stream location to make sure that it has the habitats that are essential. So most essential habitats: rocks, roots, riffles, leaf debris. Rocks that you can pick up in your hand and look at mayflies scurrying on the bottom of it. Roots are generally where you find crayfish and dragonfly larvae. Riffles, you get stoneflies and water pennies. Leafy debris, you just have different critters in each habitat. So you've really got to find those habitats in order to get an accurate reading of what your macroinvertebrate score could be. We're all over the watershed. So we have some teams that are directly in the Haw. Most of our teams are on small streams. Like I mentioned earlier, our teams, a lot of the times they reach out to us because they're concerned about an issue in their creek. And that makes it easy for us. We already know what location you want to be in. if they just want to join our team or join a team or join the program and they don't have a location yet, then that's pretty fun for us because we can kind of pick and choose where we have gaps and we can fill those gaps that way. This is probably goes without saying, but just so I say it out loud, we always have to prioritize safety. So if this bank is really steep, which we see in a lot of our eroded urban Piedmont streams, that's not a place that we can go for teams. Not only would it be unsafe for them to go in and out of the creek if it's deep, but you're not going to find those habitats where it's deep. You're not going to be able to get to the bottom of the stream bed to look for all of those critters. So that does limit us in a lot of ways. We use this data in so many ways. Obviously, Adam and Cam have showed the importance of the data from nonprofit groups. I think it was Adam who mentioned that the state doesn't have the resources to go do this on a regular basis. So they've really relied on groups like ours, other riverkeeper groups, other EQI groups, to make sure that we have this information about our streams. None of this data can be used for the 303D listing, the tier that we are collecting, but it is used in the integrated water quality report. We also use this data in our State of the Haw, which I'll show you a little bit later. But we produce a report every year about all of the parameters that we're collecting. So like I mentioned, I'm really talking just about our Riverwatch program today, which is our volunteer program with macroinvertebrates. But Haw River Assembly is collecting so much data. My water quality program manager, Caitlin Elliott, is also on the call, and she'll actually be a part of the next webinar on September 13th to talk about some of the data. But we are collecting plastic data, we're collecting E. coli, we're collecting nutrient data around CAFOs, we're collecting turbidity data. There's so much information that we're really analyzing for the Haw. So all of that goes into our State of the Haw report, including our macroinvertebrate data from our Riverwatch teams. But this data is also, we're able to track trends. So there was one specific example a couple of years ago where there was a Publix grocery store that was proposed to go into a small creek that had a floodplain to a wetland. And we had a lot of data on this creek because we had a team there for many years. And so we were able to show the trend of these creeks that were in this area and how the creeks were very healthy, and they were some of the most healthy in the county because it had this wetland and this floodplain and this natural buffer area. So we were able to use that information to show how essential this wetland was to our community and to our watershed. And the Publix had to relocate, so they did not go into that area. And that was largely informed by the trends that we had been tracking with our program. Additionally, it identifies any red flags. So if our volunteers know that they've been at their site for a year and every single time they go and they find a healthy macroinvertebrate population, if they go the next time and they find absolutely nothing, or they find only very pollution tolerant issues or pollution tolerant macroinvertebrates, that indicates to us as staff that something's going on and we need to investigate that. So that's when Caitlin and I will do further assessment and figure out what is the problem going into that stream. And then the basis of our organization is advocacy. So all of this data is informing our advocacy work. It sounds obvious, but the streams that have healthy buffers are the healthiest macroinvertebrate populations. So we use this information to push for stronger water quality protections, stronger buffer ordinances, and any protections that we can claw back for our water quality in the state. I threw some links in here, so I'm going to get through the presentation and then I'll just briefly go through some of the resources that we have on our website. Okay, so this is our State of the Hall report that I mentioned earlier. We're still working on our 2024, so I'm going to show you a bit of our 2023. So first I'll go through a couple of the lessons learned while we're here. So I mentioned this already. The equipment is expensive. We do not meet our costs by that $120 per team, especially if you factor in staff time. But it is worth it. We have a lot of data and we prefer having some data than no data. So not all teams submit every quarter, and that's okay. We don't want to discourage teams from participating just because they have a busy summer. So we try to get data every quarter. Caitlin is reaching out to the teams to remind them and very kindly nag them. But sometimes we don't get data every quarter, and that's fine. One thing that we have learned is it's pretty essential for us, with all of the work that we're doing outside of this program, to have a dedicated staff member to actually use that data. Adam and Cam know this well, but we wear a lot of hats at environmental nonprofits. All of us do. And so I've had this huge spreadsheet of data that we just haven't been able to use in an effective way. And now that we have staff that can do that work and actually enjoy doing that work, it has really changed the game for us. So I highly recommend that. And then lastly, our volunteers do so much for us in this program, and holding socials or workshops for those volunteers really help them stay engaged and show them how much we appreciate them. So they want to learn. They're data nerds and they love being in the creek. They love looking at bugs. So they want to learn more. Is there more information that they can learn about specific species of stonefly or mayflies? They want that information. So we give it to them. Like I said before, it's really fun to look at all of these critters with a handheld microscope. So holding those workshops are really inexpensive for us as an organization, but really pays off for our volunteer engagement. Okay, so before I go into this, I'm going to show you these resources that I mentioned. I'm not going to spend much time on these, but I'll drop the links in the chat just so you know where they live. This is our Riverwatch program. So we've got the Riverwatch survey form here. This is the most important part, this scoring sheet for our macroinvertebrates. This is based on the Isaac Walton League scoring. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. Okay, can you all still see that? Yeah, great. Okay. So they're also collecting physical parameter information, types of algae. Is there an unusual amount of algae? All of this information helps us to understand if there's a problem that we need to investigate. But on this site, we've got a lot of other resources too. So information about workshops. One thing I failed to mention is every semester we also have an intern that goes out and collects information on our streams for different sites. And that's a great opportunity for an intern to get fieldwork experience. And from our point of view, you know, we're spending a lot of time as a mentorship. We take that role very seriously for us. And we give them a stipend and mileage reimbursement. But it's a great program for an intern. And then, yeah, there's a lot of information down here. So if you are one of those people that's interested in starting a program, there's a whole workshop of how we do this. A lot of resources here. Okay, and then our State of the Haw, I'll drop this link in the chat also, but this is all of the data that we're collecting. So bacteria, nutrients, industrial toxins, plastic, macroinvertebrates, all of this is in one 32-page report. And then lastly, I just want to show off Caitlin Elliott's data page. So we have been collecting a lot of this information And all of this has been put into a map here. And she's also created an open source code that other people can use for their data to do this same layout. And she'll talk about that more on September 13th. So I'm not going to make a whole lot of time about it now. Okay. So lastly, we have several different parameters that we monitor for. What I spend most of my time on right now is industrial contaminants. So many of you may know, but the HAW is incredibly impacted by PFAS and 1,4-dioxane. So I'm monitoring for that a lot. I'm trying to figure out where the pollution sources are, hold the pollution sources that we've already litigated against accountable. And all of that data is also available to the public. Biosolids applications are another major source of PFAS and 1,4-dioxane. They're used as agricultural fertilizer, so we're collecting that data. Sediment and nutrient pollution. Anne-Marie talked about sediment issues a lot. If you live in the Piedmont, you see it. Our creeks are bright orange after a rain event, and it shouldn't be that way. Microplastics and development and climate crisis, those are also some things that we're tracking. Okay, and that is all that I have. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you so much. We love hearing about your program and sharing it with others because it's so great. Both you and Anne-Marie have amazing programs and are great examples. So they are good resources. This recording will be offered publicly. I've heard from Lauren Daniel, who runs our North Carolina Streamwatch program, by the way, if you are interested in educational engagement in streams. So we only have a few minutes left. I had one question for you in the chat, Emily. Interest from Fuchsia, and I'd love to hear more about what types of plastic monitoring, what your volunteer retention is like. That's a lot. If you can answer this in like less than a minute, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'll try to. I love our plastics program, so I'm going to try to be quick. We have a trash trap that goes into, we have 8 of them right now across the watershed. So they're basically floating chain link fences in our creeks that have booms that filter the trash in and trap it. Kind of self-explanatory. But our teams go out once a month and they're cleaning out that trap, but they're also documenting what kind of trash is in it. So they are, without exaggeration, they're on the side of the bank with a tarp counting, 3,000 pieces of styrofoam. And then we can take that information, and we've got this beautiful story map that our staff member Madison Haley made that shows, how much trash and what kinds of trash we're pulling out of our creeks. So then we can take that information to Durham City Council, Chapel Hill City Council, and say, if you had common sense policies to eliminate styrofoam, we would have X amount of trash removed from our streams every year. So I won't get into how the General Assembly at the state level messed that up for us. But it's a really cool program, and it helps us get a lot of volunteers that way. I think of litter cleanups as kind of the gateway drug to environmentalism. It's really rewarding to look at a creek that's filled with trash, and then 2 hours later, it's a beautiful stream again. So
true enough. Those are the trash traps are great too. All right, so last but not least, I'm going to ask George Santucci, who is the sustainability director with the town of Boone and a NC North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub founder, to share the resources that we have for you. And I see your screen. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And Adam, if you can respond to the question for you in the chat, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. I just want to make sure. So I'm formerly director of New River Conservancy. We were one of the founding members of this, and so proud to be working with all the people you've heard so far today. Have all been part of this from the get-go since 2018 as we've been putting this program together. As you've learned, Christy is our fearless leader now, and the Aquatic Data Hub lives on the WRRI website, which is what you see on your screen right now. And I just want to point you to a couple of resources here. Again, that tiered system that Cam talked about is denoted on the site to show you the different tiers and what goes into each tier. And then more importantly, I want to show you this right here, the Aquatic Data Hub Methods Manual. So I already have it open. This is really a handbook on how to set up a volunteer program, all the different parameters, different types of methodologies for collecting water quality data. I don't have time to go through the whole thing, but I just want you to know that it exists. I really encourage you to go check it out and learn more from it. The beauty of this is it's really visual. It has all these icons to show you what types of monitoring protocols are in here and the tiers associated with the different protocols in here, and talks about safety data, site selection, and sampling types. But again, everything is consistently color coded to the different tiers, so you know which protocol, which equipment is going to be associated with each tier, and then whether you have a QApp or don't have a QApp, again, where that's going to go. So there's tons and tons of information in here. So please go to the WRI website and check that out. And I will just close by putting a plug for the monthly Aquatic Data Hub meetings. Please join us. We all have a great time, and we get to share all kinds of, and it's a great place to ask questions and learn from your fellow water quality monitors. So thanks.
Thank you, George. And we are going to do a better effort at making those more accessible. So we do have a Google group list that we've used that we will use more. So if you were on this call, we will probably add your email to it. And if you don't want to stay on it, take it off. That's fine, or tell me to take it off. But we want to give folks the opportunity to join those monthly calls. And then finally, we have one other webinar scheduled. This database that we talked about for helping to manage data so it's easily uploadable for DEQ and EPA sites, and also other uses. We will be having a webinar on September 13th as an introduction to that database. It is an Microsoft Access-based database. And that's it. It's 11:30, so we are going to wrap up on time, exactly on time. So thank you, everybody, for participating, and we hope to see you at our next one.